Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking with a person that you will see by the photo, and as you can see in the photo, he really needs no introduction, but we're going to do it anyway. This is Carmen Policy, the legendary Carmen Policy, who was president of the San Francisco 49ers for many years and then established the new Cleveland Browns, and now is in a major role with the Lennar Corporation in San Francisco, working on the Bayview Hunters Point San Francisco 49ers Stadium project. Carmen, how are you?
I'm great, absolutely great, Kenny. Thank you very much for having me share some time with you.
Oh, hey, I'm blessed to be able to do the same with you, Carmen. Hey, let's take us back a bit, because my viewers are aware of you in bits and pieces, but as I said in the prep for this conversation, I view you as a person who understands better than anyone else the value chain of events of how to establish sports organizations and franchises. First of all, give my viewers a taste of your background with your own words. How did you get started in all this?
Well, actually, my career, when I was 23 and graduating from Georgetown Law School, and actually I was the youngest kid in the class, was all directed toward and dedicated to the law. And I had this desire to do trial work, and I was able to fulfill that desire, and I loved it. It was exciting. It was fun. I think it was more fun in those days than it would be today, because it was more, shall we say, dramatic and characteristic of what our romantic ideas of trial work would identify with, as opposed to today's heavily bound papers and high degree of technicality and big firm overabundance of discovery.
Not to mention billable hours, right?
And billable, I could never adjust to billable hours. I used to just kind of wing it and say, okay, I need a retainer fee. I think I'm going to have to charge around this amount, and if we're successful, I need a success fee. And that's kind of the way we did things then. Yeah, I guess you can't do that today.
That's a better way, I think.
That's the way. And I have to tell you, the number of clients who ultimately objected were so far and few between, I can't even remember the names or numbers. And I just think it worked better for everybody. How do you sit there and keep track of every phone call and every little message you write, or every suggestion you make to an associate, or every conversation you have with a client? I call clients just to see how they're doing.
Yep.
And it's so anyway, and fortunately for me,
and so today they say, are we on the clock?
I meet this young guy that I immediately bonded with, who is a feisty kind of, shall we say, guy's guy by the name of Eddie DeBartolo.
Mr. D.
And he just gets out of Notre Dame. I had just, a few years before, got out of Georgetown. I was in the prosecutor's office, ready to start my own practice. And we start talking to each other and going to dinner, and all of a sudden I become his lawyer. And all of a sudden his father has me doing some things for the corporation, and all of a sudden I'm doing a lot of different things and trying a lot of big cases. And he comes home to Youngstown one night, comes into a restaurant where I'm having dinner, and he says, I just bought a football team. I just bought a football team. So I immediately thought, if Eddie and his dad bought a football team, it was the Cleveland Browns. And I said, I didn't even know the Cleveland Browns were for sale. He said, they're not for sale. I bought the San Francisco 49ers. I said, why'd you buy the 49ers? Now, keep in mind, this is 1977. San Francisco is halfway around the world to us. I said, why would you buy the Niners? He says, because they were for sale. And all of a sudden,
with Joe Thomas and all,
he takes in Joe Thomas. I wasn't there then. But all of a sudden, he takes in Joe Thomas. All of a sudden, my client, my buddy, a guy who people used to think was my brother, owns this football team in San Francisco. And things were pretty rough those first 2 years. And he brought me out in late 1978 We did some talking. All of a sudden, early 1979, he throws me on his airplane and says, "We're going out there to meet this guy, Walsh. I want to interview him a second time, and I want to decide whether to hire him. But in any event, I'm firing Joe Thomas." And that started it all. January of 1979, my first official duty for the San Francisco 49ers. After the negotiation with Bill that night when Eddie hired him, was to deal with his contract and to deal with the grievance filed by Joe Thomas after his firing.
How did that come out, by the way, that grievance?
Joe Thomas?
Yeah.
He got most of his money. We only saved about $50,000. He got all of it.
What's fascinating to me, and what will eventually lead into our discussion about present day, is that you essentially arrived on the scene and charted a business course. And what is your business style? Because I'm going to say what I've seen. It seems both process oriented yet personable. And you seem to have a great way of establishing this, again, value chain of relationships to get a thing done. Did that just happen by accident? Was that intentional? How did that happen?
I think you put it pretty well. And it's a value chain of relationships. I don't think I've ever put it that way, but I think that's exactly it. You have to understand, my life has been basically centered around dealing with people. When I was a kid, I was raised by my grandmother. I worked in produce markets in downtown Youngstown and at the Kroger supermarkets, and I dealt with the old ladies coming in and squeezing my tomatoes, and they used to irritate the hell out of me. I would orchestrate and organize these tomatoes into a beautiful arrangement, and these old ladies would come and they'd start squeezing them, and it would just drive. I'm somewhat anal to begin with, and it would drive me nuts. And so I had to deal with these ladies that came in all the time, and I would talk to them. Before they had a chance to touch them, I said, "I knew you were coming. I picked this one for you." And, so, I mean, you just have to learn to deal with people. And then after a while, when I went into law, I mean, how much more do you deal with people than with juries? And how do you deal with people than when you're dealing with clients who are going through tremendous stress situations? And so it just seemed natural. When I came on board at the 49ers, my first real duties were to handle problem situations. Handle the firing of Joe Thomas. Handle the negotiations of a very sensitive situation like Bill Walsh when he's first coming on board.
Right.
Deal with two defensive backs who were starters in the backfield that were holding out because the contract situation was a problem. And Bill Walsh did not want anybody in the building in San Francisco dealing with them or their agents because he was fearful that hard feelings and bad blood would develop. And so all of that combined with learning from these wonderful football minds that I was exposed to just set me up in a perfect way to run the table.
But there's an aspect that I've come to observe of you, and that is, I think, I'll say this differently. I think it came to fore during the Proposition DNF campaign. Remember that? That was a phenomenal experience. And you were masterful. Can you talk about how, because that really leads into what we're talking about today if you think about it, but how did it come that you all determined that you were going to need a proposition? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was your first foray into San Francisco politics, was it not?
Absolutely. I thought I knew and understood San Francisco. I had no idea what San Francisco was all about. Absolutely. You want to talk about a wide-eyed rookie? I walked into San Francisco politics starting in January, February of 1997, and boy, did I get a lesson. It was an unbelievable experience, and Eddie and I realized that where the league was headed was pretty obvious to those who had their eyes open. The league, the NFL, was becoming a product of stadium economics. And we understood with the cap the way it was and what it meant, that if you didn't have a new stadium with the kind of revenues that a new stadium could generate, you were going to not only slip, you were going to spiral to the bottom.
Absolutely.
In terms of revenues. And competing against those guys that were going to have the iconic venues with all of the different forms of revenues and so forth was really going to be very difficult. So we understood we had to do something. We also understood that our first choice, no matter what, was to stay in San Francisco. That was our goal. We made up our minds we would stay in San Francisco for an acceptable deal, even if there was a better deal elsewhere. But it had to be acceptable. And Willie Brown stepped up, and he really saved our bacon.
He was masterful, wasn't he?
Oh, he was phenomenal. And I have become a Willie groupie. Because I saw him work. I saw him.
Are you at Les Centrale on Thursdays now?
Oh, well, I'm not in the Friday crowd, so I try to get into any other day I can, okay, at Les Centrale. Did you read the article, by the way?
Missed.
They're the ones who sent the food over to him when he was in the hospital at UCSF.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
He was dying with the hospital food. And finally, Stanley Gaddy and a few others delivered an appropriate meal with appropriate silver service.
I have to explain, folks, for those viewers who are, say, living in London and watching this, which is occasionally true. What Carmen and I are talking about is the campaign to issue a $100 million bond to help pay for the then planned 49ers stadium. You have to take the bond issue to the voters, and they won. It was 2 propositions, D and F. Now, fast forward to what Carmen's talking about today. There's a restaurant called Les Centrale on Bush Street, near Bush and Kearny. And Willie has a tendency to hang out there Thursdays and Fridays. But they have terrific food. And so when Willie was in the hospital, that's what Carmen's referring to. So if you're online, you're listening to this, Google Les Centrale San Francisco, and then when you come to San Francisco, go over there. Right, Carmen?
Oh, it's wonderful. It's fun. You got every kind of waiter you can imagine there, and it's your exceptional French bistro, and it's just a wonderful part of San Francisco.
And it's also this kind of camaraderie and this discussion that we're having that leads to getting things done. And it's no surprise that Kofi Bonner, who you actually hired, called you back to work in Lennar. And I want to give you a little backstory. I was one of the first people who was aware that you were going to hire Kofi to be the chief administrative officer of the new Cleveland Browns. Why? Because 2 weeks prior to the press conference, he and I had dinner, and he said, I sat down with Carmen, and he told me about this job. And I said, what job? And he said, well, it's the Cleveland Browns, but I don't know. I think, what do you mean you don't know? Go and do it.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What?
I stole him from Willie.
Wonderful job. But
he was Willie's economic development director and advisor, and it's the only time I did something behind Mayor Willie Brown's back. The only time, because I was afraid to address it honestly and straightforwardly with him, because I thought he'd find a way to kill the deal.
And he would.
So I reached Kofi when he
did that to me with a Super Bowl.
Right. And I told him, I promised him everything and so forth and so on. I said, now don't tell Willie. Please don't tell Willie. No matter what happens, don't tell him. If you accept the job, we'll tell him just before we announce it, because I just won't be able to live with him if you tell him in advance, okay? So
that was smart.
Long and short is, Kofi does accept the job, which I'm so happy to say he did, because he did a phenomenal job in Cleveland. Yeah. Just a phenomenal. Yeah. Finished the stadium there. He dealt with the community. We had 3 months to get an organization, an NFL professional football organization, up, running, drafting, and on the field. 3 months. And he just was, I just can't tell you how valuable he was. So Willie called me, and he said, Carmen Policy, you are so fortunate that I am the mayor of San Francisco. and not the district attorney. Because were I the district attorney, you would be indicted for grand theft.
That's his humor. Momentary aside, I was in fact, folks watching this, you can actually see this on my YouTube channel, which you're watching. Google, search for Karen Bass, Zenny62. Carmen, I was at a reception for Speaker Bass, and Willie was the MC. And he says, now, I want all of you to drink, and get drunk so I can represent you. That's Willie's humor. Now, but it's also a matter of, we're talking again, folks, with a person about people who get things done. And in what Carmen has just talked about is taking 3 months to establish new Cleveland Browns, also getting up to speed with the stadium and stadium financing. All of that history has come to bear on your current assignment with Lennar. Tell me and tell my viewers how that came to pass that you were able to come back here and get involved in what I think is a wonderful project and opportunity.
Well, it started with a meeting with, not even a meeting. It started with my spending time with Mayor Gavin Newsom at a 49er game, and we had seen each other around town after I got back, and he said, look, I'm working on a plan for the 49ers. When I sense that there's definition to that plan, I'm going to call you and get you involved. And at that point, I'm thinking, okay, he's the mayor. He sees me. This comes to his mind at this moment. He'll probably forget it in about 45 minutes. And
not Gavin. Oh, no.
Then I was going on a panel at the Commonwealth Club to discuss venues for the NFL, and in particular, the potential venues for the 49ers. And Gavin called me and said, I want to have breakfast with you. And it was the same morning. We met at the Fairmont. He says, I think we have our deal ready to be put in place. I want you involved. I don't know if I want you involved in terms of being part of the city. I don't know if I want you involved in terms of being part of Lennar, but I want you involved in the project. So we have got to put this together. And are you willing to do it? And I said, yes, I'm willing to do it. I consider this whole stadium issue unfinished business for me.
Right.
And he said, that's what I figured. He says, okay, and we'll figure it all out. You'll hear from Michael Cohen in my office. Lo and behold, Michael Cohen was on that panel with me that day. And so that started it all, and it just made more sense that because it was a business-oriented deal, I did not want to be tied to the rules and regulations that affect politics, that affect City Hall and so forth.
Right.
So I said, I'm just not fit to be into that political scene where I'm a city person. So I went with Lennar technically, but I'm working in the city's best interest.
How is it? Let's talk about the project. And we're talking about 600,000 square feet of retail space, 2.1 million square feet of office space, 17,500 permanent jobs, and of course the stadium. The financing apparently is that you're going to give $100 million to the 49ers, but then of course you've got to go to the redevelopment agency for approval. How much of that is going to call for tax increment financing? Is that going to be part of the deal as well?
That'll be part of the deal, but the good news is nothing that's connected with this deal takes one dime out of the city coffers.
That's right.
It is a blueprint for other cities, especially in California, to follow. I think this is going to be a roadmap for Southern California, especially when it comes to dealing with sports venues. And perhaps, I haven't thought it out, but perhaps other types of venues too, as well as NFL or NFL stadiums or perhaps even arenas. But I honestly think that this is the roadmap that's going to be able to be followed with some degree of success, whereby the California style of no public monies per se can be maintained.
Right. And let's follow up on that if we may, because I'm a person who's done redevelopment taxing and financing calculations for clients, and for those lay people out there, what Carmen is saying is absolutely true. It's not tongue-in-cheek. Redevelopment agency established project areas. We're talking about Bayview Hunters Point, which is already established. And the developments there will actually increase the current property values. And because they're privately owned, it'll actually put more money in the redevelopment agency's pocket. Right, Carmen?
Well, exactly. Right now, you know what you have there?
Mm-hmm.
You have Navy land
Mm-hmm.
that's toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not getting any taxes off that. Am I right, Vinny?
That's right.
And what's going to happen is the Navy pays for the cleanup. And thank God for Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi, because they brought the money back home. And the Navy's doing
right.
the legal and morally right thing, cleaning up that property. And that property is going to be clean, ready to go, and deliverable in short order. I'm talking about the Hunters Point property, where the first phase of the housing and the stadium project would go. And they're cleaning up the entire area so that all of the property will be available for the total development program. And you're going in there and you're taking wasteland. You're taking something even worse than wasteland.
True.
And you're turning it into an oasis.
True.
And you're going to have, and what do you hear coming out of so many circles in San Francisco? We need more housing. We need more housing. Well, you're not only going to get more housing at the Candlestick Point, Hunters Point project, you're going to get housing of every type, including, at least as I understand it, approximately 2,500 affordable units. And I'm talking about very, very nice affordable units.
Right.
And I'm also talking about a totally rebuilt Ellis Griffith housing development. Entirely rebuilt. Everything
and
brought
sorely
down
needed.
and everything rebuilt.
That's right.
And so it's a phenomenal experience. There'll probably be 600,000 square feet of retail over at Candlestick Point and another 100,000 of retail surrounding the housing areas to accommodate that kind of community. You're going to have probably 2 million square feet of clean tech, office and research, R&D type facilities. You're going to have 300 acres of parkland and open space and bike trails. And then you're going to have an opportunity for this new stadium. And I'll give you whatever details you want on that in terms of what's on tap for the 49ers.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about the stadium because I remember the first one to the point where I think there was something called the International Council of Shopping Centers Spring Convention. And you all took a model of the stadium to ICSC.
Right.
And as I recall, that model had what you all referred to as a kind of a knuckle that connected the football stadium with the retail. Is this one going to be different from that?
It will be different. And I think actually it will be better. Now, if Eddie DeBartolo had not had the complications that he did
right.
and could have kept the team, the stadium would have been built by now. We'd have had at least one, maybe two Super Bowls by now.
Yep.
But I must tell you this, and that would have been a great situation. But if you had to start from scratch, if you had to start from the same point of go, if you will, I feel very strongly this deal, this arrangement, this program is better than the one we would have had we built the stadium. It's better for the stadium. It's better for the overall area. It enables the entire Candlestick Point and Hunters Point to be developed, as opposed to just Candlestick Point. This is really good for the city.
What, in terms of a person out there might be listening to this and thinking, well, that's fantastic, but when is it going to be finished? When can I expect to buy season tickets in a new 49ers stadium?
If the 49ers came to the table next year, if they said, okay, things aren't going the way we wanted them to go in Santa Clara, we're ready to sit down and negotiate a final deal. That's 09. Our EIR process is well along. I would think we would be able to start construction sometime at the end of 010 or 11. They could be in there by 13. By 2013, they could be playing at Candlestick Point. I beg your pardon, at Hunters Point.
This is going to be, some of the people watching this are from the Scout message board, the 49er message board, and I know they're going to say, okay, Carmen, who do I send a letter to? Do I send a letter to John York to say, get behind you? What do I have to do to help you? What?
I think you send a letter to the 49ers care of John and Jed.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to send it to both, because I think Jed's taking Jed, the son of John York and Denise DeBartolo York. I think he's taking a very proactive role now in terms of running that whole organization. I think giving him some support in terms of the decision to stay here in Hunters Point is very, very, very critical. And I also think that as we move forward, every time you see something positive happen with this project at Hunters Point and Candlestick Point, it just keeps enhancing the credibility of the project.
That's right.
And as you look at any other projects around the Bay Area, especially in this environment, this economic environment, you don't see them moving at all. And if anything, they seem to be moving backwards.
So this is the only one.
That's the optimism that's been attached to this particular project.
But this is the only project that's gotten, I think, this far. I don't know. Santa Clara doesn't have a financing plan that's complete and approved, does it?
No, they don't.
And I don't know if anybody else that does. And
they haven't even gotten their situation to the point where they know when and if they're going on the ballot. They have to clear up the Cedar Fair issues, and I know they're trying to do that. But I mean, I think it's kind of stagnant at this point.
I want to ask you. This is your platform, and I do that for the people that I talk with. From your long, tenured, and wide-ranging perspective, what do you think of the NFL right now? The state of the NFL. What's the state of the NFL in your opinion?
Well, I think we always have to remember that the NFL is America's sports passion.
Mm-hmm.
The highest rated programming on TV by far. I mean, there's nothing. I haven't seen the numbers lately, but I'm not going to go too far out on a limb and suggest that I think the NFL ratings are as high as all the other ratings for the other professional sports put together. And then I would go so far as to say that as far as TV is concerned, as far as the technology relating to broadcasting, the NFL format, the field, the way the game's presented, fits so perfectly into the medium, into the TV screen, that it's as though you had TV first, and then you devised the game of professional football or even college football. That's how those two go hand in hand. You couldn't imagine anything better suited for the TV screen, TV broadcasting, the TV technicalities than college and pro football.
That's right.
And then you have the way our time goes in terms of timeouts, time clock stopped, and so forth. Again, perfect for advertising. So, if anything, I just see the NFL stature growing and not in the least bit subsiding. That having been said, I think the NFL and every other major company and industry in this country is going to be affected by the economy. And you're going to see some reflections of that somehow, some way. And I'm almost inclined to say maybe even in the short term. At first I thought you wouldn't see it until later next year. You might even see it as early as this Super Bowl.
I heard ticket prices, I think, are going down for the Super Bowl, except for the 25% that are 1,000, something like that.
Right, they're going up for the elite tickets, but I think they're going down, aren't they?
Yeah,
for a good number of the other tickets.
Yeah, that was the press release that was put out,
and that's probably a good thing that they're doing it that way. Now, that having been said, I feel that if the league can overcome its immediate hurdle dealing with a collective bargaining agreement, which in my mind, although others would consider it separate, also includes resolving their revenue sharing issues. If they can combine those two issues and resolve them in a totally satisfactory way, then sit back and you watch them accelerate into the next decade.
On the issue of collective bargaining, I was blessed enough to be able to sit with Morris Bradshaw at the Raiders game last Sunday, and we talked mostly about Gene Upshaw. What are your thoughts about Gene Upshaw, and how do you see the NFLPA progressing in the wake of his passing, or wherever it will go? I'm curious.
I have had the fortunate opportunity to have become friends with Gene, to have worked with Gene Upshaw, to have dealt with him on several issues, to interact with him as he would come to our team and desire to interact with our players. I drank wine with him in the Napa Valley. Did you know he was a wine enthusiast?
I did not. I did not know
yes.
that. No.
He was a big-time wine enthusiast. As a matter of fact, he would be the celebrity pourer at the Silver Oak release parties every year up in the Napa Valley. And he was just one of those exceptional human beings that you meet, if you're lucky, a few times in your life. And he was strong, he was vibrant, he was tough, but he was so fair. I think the combination of Gene Upshaw and Commissioner Paul Tagliabue being able to come together and understand the importance of preserving the purity and the dignity of the game was really one of the unique, symbiotic kind of relationships that brought the NFL again to the point of becoming America's passion.
And he did a lot for a lot of people, and I had met Gene. In fact, twice. I met him when I was a little boy, but the last time I met him, or really saw him again, was at the Super Bowl in Houston in 2004. I went with my friend and reintroduced myself. And you believe it or not, he actually remembered that I met him with his brother Marvin when I was 16 years old. So
you know what? I'm impressed, but I'm not shocked. I can almost believe that he was not just being nice.
Right? No, not at all. He was genuine. He was very genuine. He was very warm, and it's a sad thing, and it's hard to. I'm sorry, don't want to get too off the track, because I think I've spent most of my week talking about Gene Upshaw with someone in some kind of way. But it also bears the unfortunate question of who. I hate to ask this question, but who can replace a Gene Upshaw? Jeffrey Kessler.
I think Jeffrey Kessler is one of the brilliant people involved in this whole CBA scenario. I think that he is a mastermind behind some of the phenomenal strategies that have been implemented by the Players Association. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's someone that they are thinking of for executive director. Mm-hmm. Because as executive director, you are required to do so many different things. You're required to appear before Congress. You're required to travel and visit each and every team. You're required to do so many social and promotional situations. You're required to do a lot that would take I'll say a mastermind like Jeffrey Kessler mm-hmm. away from his ability to work in the laboratory and come up with the phenomenal formulas and concoctions that result in the creation of either the medical miracles or the Frankenstein monsters. However he wants to do it, he can do one or the other. Jeffrey's capable of going one direction or the other, whatever the cause requires.
If someone listening to this might say, why not you for the job?
Oh, no. I'm on the other side. I'm management. I couldn't go to the dark side. I just
Carmen, I want to be very respectful with your time, because we go on forever. But I want to ask, is there anything you want the fans to know before we close? And also, I want to thank you for, first of all, providing a very wide-ranging interview, because I've always wanted to be able to talk with you in this fashion, but also you provide, with your experience and your knowledge and intelligence, a breadth of views on different areas inside and outside the National Football League, and also to bear on the Lennar project, which is of such importance to San Francisco. Is there anything you'd like our viewers and listeners to know as we close?
Well, I want them to know that I'm kind of sitting in their seat and wearing their shoes now, because I'm coming at it from the standpoint of a citizen, concerned citizen, and a fan. I think that it's in the best interest of the Niners, if they can, to stay in San Francisco. That's where they were born. That's where their roots were planted. This is where they maintain the highest brand identity. This is where the fans are least disrupted. And this is where I think America, and maybe even the world, would feel better about them placing themselves than anywhere else. Anywhere else, perhaps, not only in the Bay Area, but anywhere else in the state or the country. So if we can have a deal that comes close to being the best deal available, I think this is what should be accepted by whoever the ownership is of the 49ers.
And the major piece is to 49ers fans, contact John York and Jed and help Carmen out. Hey, Carmen, I really appreciate your time. We'll do it again, too. And I want to come and drink your wine.
I know. I knew you were going to say that. The only question I have, are you willing to pay for it?
Yes, I am. I'm willing to pay for it. Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Please, you be my guest. Come on up there and
delighted.
We'll open a bottle, and I'll just pray to God that you like it.
Oh, I'm certain I will. And even though I pray every day, I don't think I'll have to pray to drink it, so I'll be just fine.
Do you know the name of our label?
No. What is the name of your label?
This is so much fun. Casa Piena, Casapiena, Casa Piena. In Italian, that translates to full house. And I have 3 sons and 2 daughters, so 3 of a kind and a pair.
And Casa Piena. And one of your sons, Ed, has become a friend of mine. I see Ed every Super Bowl.
Oh.
And he's in line to be commissioner of the AFL, from what I hear,
he's the acting commissioner now, and he was president and deputy commissioner, and he's gotten great experience from that league. And he was a lawyer as well, as you know. He went to Stanford. And he enjoyed practicing law, but I think he really enjoys the sports industry so much more. It's kind of become his passion as well.
And he's learned a lot from you. I can tell in talking with him and also watching the way that he works with people. He's learned a lot from you. It's obvious. He's very proud of you.
Oh, well, that's a compliment to me, and I thank you for it.
Yeah, thank you. And Carmen, I thank you for your time.
Take care.
All right.
Bye.
See ya.